Number 10. Chuck Austen's Uncanny X-Men. At least, I kind of hope you've never heard of this one, because if you have, you probably just forgot about it after years of trying, and now I'm traumatizing you by bringing it back up. This is the team that featured Stacy X. Yeah. I like Stacy X, but I can also see why her character and this run were super problematic. Austen's run on Uncanny X-Men began in issue 410 and ran till issue 443. The problem here wasn't so much to do with the members of the team as the subject matter. Many people feel that Austen's run was hypersexual, and he also gave us the revelation that Nightcrawler's dad was Azazel, which honestly isn't that terrible, but then he also gave us the weird Draco storyline with the X-Men versus the NeoFem, which was something. It was a time. All in, this was definitely a controversial run, especially considering the relationship between Husk and Angel. The team was made up of Archangel, Beast, Iceman, Nightcrawler, Stacy X, Wolverine, and Professor X himself to start, but it would later on feature Husk, Polaris, Northstar, Juggernaut, and Havoc. Before we move on to this next spot, just a quick little reminder to click that like button if you haven't already, it really does help us out. Number 9. All-Female X-Men. Oddly enough, this book didn't do as hot as expected, despite the fact that it was an awesome powerhouse team composed of all ladies. This team was first introduced in 2013's X-Men series in issue number 1, as one of the main X-Men teams, and the series was part of the Marvel Now event. The team featured Kitty Pryde, Rogue, Rachel Summers, Jubilee, and Psylocke, with Storm as the leader. This team was the first in the history of the X-Men to be an all-female team with its own book. So while it was not a commercial success, it's still an important part of X-Men history to be noted for sure. Number 8. Children of the Atom. You might not have heard of this one because it isn't even out yet, but this is one of the new teams and books that we had expected to see earlier this year, but due to the global pandemic was delayed and is now delayed again. Originally it was moved to January of 2021, but now we aren't expected to see it till April of 2021. Boy, that is a long wait. But just because they aren't around yet doesn't mean we can't talk about them. And if you haven't heard of this team yet, you might want to keep your eye out for when their book is released. Children of the Atom is a team of new teen mutants who are basically X-Men superfans and are trained by these very famous original mutants. Technically, the X-Men team was never meant to exist in Krakoa, as was just revealed recently in the comics, despite them having their own book as part of the Dawn of X line. I know, it's a little confusing. So it'll be interesting to see how the Children of the Atom, who are being advertised as kind of X-Men sidekicks, fit in exactly. In a world where, you know, there's not really supposed to be X-Men? Well, we have yet to meet the members of this team. We do know some of them not only have similar costumes to the classic X-Men, but also have similar powers. Number 7. Hellions. No, not that Hellions. This Hellions. In fact, Empath's look in the new Hellions was a throwback to the original Hellions team outfits. Empath was also an original member of the team. Before we saw the team revived in Dawn of X, they were Emma Frost's team. Basically her version of a teenage mutant team similar to, well, the New Mutants. We're also a teenage mutant team. Every time I say teenage mutant team, I just want to say Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but that's not what we're talking about. Although they are also a teenage mutant team. In comparison to the new Hellions, these Hellions were not as crazy, but were somewhat troublemakers, who had an ongoing, sometimes friendly rivalry with the New Mutants themselves. The team consisted of Empath, Beef, Bevatron, Cat's Eye, Roulette, Taro, Thunderbird, Jetstream, and Firestart. The team was first introduced in New Mutants issue number 16 in the 1980s and was disbanded in 2009 in the comics after most of them were basically slaughtered, victims of a surprise attack. The team has returned since, but the new Hellions team only shares one member of the original roster, Empath. Number 6. X Corporation. Many people may have forgotten the existence of X Corporation since the organization was destroyed and became defunct back in the early 2000s, but they are coming back, so it's a pretty good time to remind everyone of their existence. Reminder, X Corp is still a thing. This actually just happened in the comics during the Empire event when we saw for certain that Xavier had revived the X Corp and that Monet and Angel seem to be running this branch of mutant affairs. X Corp in the past has been a non not-for-profit organization working to help mutants in their fight for rights, in less bold ways than what the X-Men are usually up to. It also provided a place of refuge for mutants who needed it, until the global organization had their various branches targeted and blown up around the globe following the events of M-Day. X-Corp will be getting their own book in the Dawn of X line, which I am way too excited about. I just want to see Angel get a moment in the spotlight, you know? Many believe the book to have been cancelled, but Jonathan Hickman actually confirmed early in December that it is still very much a go. Number 5. X-Men The End. In this series, we saw a bunch of teams kind of come together, ending in one big one, and Chris Claremont's The End. I like this X-Men team as well because although she died pretty early on in terms of her appearance here, we also get a shout out at least to Dust. And Dust is such an underrated X-Men in my opinion. This comic also introduces us to the future daughter of Bishop and Deathbird, Aaliyah Bishop. The final X-Men team features Kitty Pryde, Wolfsbane, Karma, North Star, Dust, Martha Johansson aka No Girl, the Cuckoos, Cyclops, and a subgroup known as the Heavy Hitters, which features Wither, Frenzy, Polaris, Juggernaut, and Kid Colossus. Number 4. The Upstarts. Speaking of young mutant teams that are lesser known like the Hellions, we also have their straight up not friendly at all rivals, the Upstarts. The Upstarts were definitely a more villainous crew in comparison to the Hellions, just in general, as their whole goal was to basically kill mutants. The Upstarts were a mutant team created by Selene, the Black Queen of the Hellfire Club. She put the team together in order to test the members, getting them to compete for points which would be awarded whenever they killed mutants, based on the mutants' power set. Originally, the young group of mutants involved were unnamed and were promised that whoever got the most points would win a prize, which remained a mystery pretty much through all of the comics that they were featured in. I bet it's cake, and I bet it's a lie. Although I think it was also mentioned at one point somewhere that it was immortality, so in case you were wondering, for realsies. Number 3. Battle of the Atom Future X-Men. While everyone might focus on the Battle of the Atom Future Brotherhood team, as Raze has a tendency to steal the show, plus my girl Zorn Jean, and also featuring Molly Hayes, people tend to forget about the awesomeness that was the Future X-Men team. The real X-Men team. This team featured a much more skilled Iceman, who now was known as Ice Wizard, Wiccan, who had become Sorcerer Supreme, Chimera, who is believed to be Storm's daughter that she had with Black Panther, Shogo, Jubilee's son, known as Sentinel X, Colossus armed with Magic Soul Sword, Kid Omega as Phoenix, and Jubilee as Wolverine. Number 2. X-TREME Sanctions Executive, the other XSE. This team also spiraled out of the team that we talked about previously on part 1 of this list, Extreme X-Men. XSE here stands for the Extreme Sanctions Executive. Similar to the original XSE that Bishop was a part of in the future, this team is also like a military police force meant to maintain and in some cases enforce peace is kept between mutants and humans. Storm was asked to create the team by the United Nations and eventually would increase its numbers by recruiting the rest of her X-Men, making this team another government-sanctioned mutant team, like X-Factor was, and still one of the first of those types of teams. Team members have included Bishop, Cannonball, Magma, Rachel Summers is on every team, I love it, Psylocke, Rogue, Sage, Wolverine, X-23, and Gambit. Number 1. X-Animals. If you're an intense X-Men fan, you may be familiar with Mojo's X-Babies, but are you familiar with his other attempts at recreating or recasting Marvel's 616 X-Men after they were believed dead? One such team that attempted to step in was the X-Animals. This was a team of, well, animals, who each took on the role of a different mutant member of the X-Men. We've got a skunk standing in for Rogue, a bulldog for Wolverine, a pig for Dazzler, a rabbit as Havoc, a cat for our Storm, which I kinda love, a bird, possibly a hawk as Longshot, an otter as Psylocke, and a gorilla as Colossus. Sadly, this team was not acceptable as a replacement in Mojo's opinion, and he got rid of them. but I'd love to see them return at some point, if that's possible. Number 10. LONGSHOT. LONGSHOT is a paradoxal hero. He ended up joining the X-Men after being sent to Earth by Mojo so that he would forget all that had passed before that, like the part where he almost defeated Mojo. Without his memories, LONGSHOT showed up in the X-Men's danger room and would end up befriending them and serving as an ally and a teammate. He is the father of Shatterstar, who he had with X-Men member Dazzler, but was also made from Shatterstar's DNA, creating a paradox and a strange time loop when it comes to his origins and his creation. LONGSHOT got his name during his time on Earth, which was given to him because of his fighting style. LONGSHOT always taking the long shot, the less likely, more desperate path of success in fights. LONGSHOT, however, can do this as while not a mutant but being engineered from the DNA of one. He possesses probability altering powers which grant him a bit of luck. He also has enhanced speed, strength, agility, and endurance, which he often uses to fight with using throwing knives. LONGSHOT is also known for his super handsome powers that cause many people he meets to instantly fall for him. Number 9. Binary. Carol Danvers as Miss Marvel ended up in a fight with Rogue that left her zapped of her powers and her memories. During the tussle, Carol was thrown from the Golden Gate Bridge, but fortunately Jessica Drew, aka Spider-Woman, showed up to save the day. Unfortunately, when Carol came to, it was apparent that her memories had been wiped. Spider-Woman reached out to the X-Men for help, and for a time, Carol Danvers became part of that team. Professor X was able to help restore Carol's memories, but her emotional attachments to those memories would remain lost. It was during her time adventuring with the X-Men that she would become binary after a space adventure with the team saw her cross paths with the Brood, who exposed her to an evolutionary ray that tapped into her latent potential. True story. Number 8. Surge. Surge grew up homeless on the streets of New York after running away from her home when her powers first manifested. Far away apparently, as she was born initially in Tokyo, and her parents still live there. Her powers caused her to absorb electricity from all nearby sources at all times, without the ability to stop, even zapping electricity out of the air. She can then discharge this energy through blasts or by using it to give herself bursts of super speed. Noriko Ashida's powers are hard for her to control and are considered volatile, which is why Beast created gauntlets for her that helped her to control them when she was later welcomed into the Xavier Institute, after initially being turned away. Number 7. Danger. Who could forget one of the most important members of the X-Men? The Danger Room. The Danger Room was a room used to help train the various members of the X-Men team, but was later revealed to be mutated technology which had evolved to become a sentient AI. So yeah, an AI mutant. Danger revealed their intelligence to Xavier when, after an upgrade and relocation facilitated by Mutant Forge, they asked, "Where am I?" Charles chose to ignore this and hide the room's sentience from the X-Men so that he could continue to use it to train his team. Pretty selfish, Professor. Danger is extremely powerful, and parallels between her and Ultron are often drawn on in the comics when it comes to all the destruction that she could be capable of. She possesses superhuman strength, stamina, and durability, as well as enhanced reflexes and agility. She can command and control other technology and use her own mass to recreate other materials and or rooms. She can also create other technology and even technological bodies if she happens to have mechanical devices, scrap, or equipment to work with. Number 6. Caliban. Caliban is believed to have gotten his name from that of the character from William Shakespeare's Tempest, often referred to as having a monstrous appearance. Poor Caliban, and also poor Caliban. Caliban is one of the members of the Morlocks, but he would later on join the X-Force and even go on to team up with the X-Men later on, despite him and the Morlocks being their frequent enemies in the past. Caliban's mutant powers increase the reaction of his fight or flight response, allowing him to manifest super strength as well as a sort of absorption and then later emission of fear. Basically, if you're feeling afraid in the moment, he can kind of like take that in and then put it back at you, or if he's feeling afraid. It's pretty useful. You're gonna be afraid, you know what I mean? These powers only appear when in this mode, however, when Caliban experiences that increase in adrenaline. He is also able to sense the presence of mutants within a nearby radius, and that's a mutant power that he has even when he's not in that fight or flight mode. Number 5. Blindfold. Blindfold is Ruth Aldine and is a possible descendant of Destiny. She was born without eyes entirely. Her mutant powers allow her to manipulate astral energy, tap into the astral plane, and grant her specific telepathic abilities, including precognition and clairvoyance. She also has the ability to manipulate chaos factors and alter events in order to achieve a desired result, and maintains a reality warp resistance. Pretty useful. She also has some telekinetic abilities as well. Much of her power was lost to her, and she was in rough shape when she was admitted to the Xavier Institute. She had lost half her power and had her mind shattered by her brother. Blindfold had a really rough home life, and her brother Luca ended up coming home one day filled with hate for his sister and prepared to kill her with a chainsaw. When her mother stepped in to defend her, her mother was instead murdered by Luca, who blamed young Ruth's freakishness for his own actions. Luca ended up getting the death penalty for this crime, but when he died, it seemed as though his own mutant abilities manifested, causing him to shift into an astral or ghost-like form and attack Ruth. Blindfold has a close connection to Legion and would later end up in a relationship with the son of Charles Xavier. Yay! I don't know why I'm celebrating that, but I just think it's kind of a cute romance, I guess. Number 4. Triage. Triage was one of the mutants to appear after the dispersion of the Phoenix Force. Christopher Muse discovered his powers when a friend of his fell and hit her head while they were out dancing. It seemed as though she was dead until Christopher's touch seemed to heal and revive her, bringing her back to life. Eventually, he was apprehended by the police because of his miraculous healing ability, but would later be freed and recruited by the X-Men. He was one of the mutants who was captured and later killed by One using the X-gene cure after he refused to use his healing powers to help them. Triage seems to have had eternal youth and immortality as a result of his powers, in addition to being able to heal others and even reanimate the dead. Fortunately, since his death, he is one of the mutants that we have seen return by the Five on Krakoa, with him being spotted in the comics at Krakoan hotspot, the Green Lagoon. Number 3. Darkwind. X-Men teammates really do come in all shapes and sizes. Coming to us from Asgard, we have Dani Moonstar's mighty steed, Brightwind. Remember when Dani joined the Valkyrie after she lost her powers following M-Day? Yeah, it was during that time that she met and bonded with Brightwind. After leaving Asgard and returning to Earth, Brightwind came with her, but instead became known as Darkwind on Earth. So that's why I said Darkwind at the beginning of this point. By extension, he became a member of the X-Men and New Mutants along with Dani. Cute. Number 2. Ariel. Ariel is an alien from the planet known as the Coconut Grove. Her mutant power is persuasion, but due to her alien physiology, she can also teleport. Ariel herself is also related to another Ariel who visited Earth and inspired the character of the same name from William Shakespeare's play, The Tempest. There's a lot of Tempest references in my list today. Ariel, the one we're focusing on with this point, not her ancestor, also ended up on Earth after being sent there on a mission to collect samples from the mutants of Earth for her people to study. They themselves had reached an evolutionary standstill as such, and were curious about the Earth mutants and their evolutionary process. It was during her time on Earth that she would meet up with and join the Fallen Angels, and later on in San Francisco would end up meeting the X-Men team and joining them for a time. Number 1. Sunpyre. You know Sunfire, but do you know Sunpyre? Sunpyre was Shiro Yoshida's younger sister, Leu. She also had powers and an attitude similar to her brothers, and first appeared in Uncanny X-Men issue 392 in 2001. For those unfamiliar with Sunfire's or Sunpyre's abilities, both siblings possess the mutant ability of solar flare, which allows them to absorb solar radiation and convert it into superheated plasma. Using this ability, they could both cover their body in flame as they became like a flying, human-shaped sun. Sunpyre can use her power to emit plasma blasts and give off intense solar heat. Leu is one of the mutants who answered a psychic call to help defeat Magneto and save Professor X. After helping out the X-Men in that adventure, she'd later appear again as a member of the X-Corps. It is believed she died in action when the other members of X-Corps turned on her because Mastermind, Martinique Wingard, working in league with Mystique, was controlling them. Number 10. Brew! Brew is one of my favorite of the more obscure X-Men members. He is a mutant of the Brood alien race. Brood are basically terrifying, violent, and love hurting others. Bru, however, is very different from the rest of his race, being a mutant. His mutant power is actually compassion or empathy. Unlike the rest of his species, he doesn't enjoy hurting others and, in fact, is more inclined to try and help others instead. Aww. Basically, he's a big Brood sweetheart. Recently in the comics, Bru accidentally became the new Brood King after consuming the King Egg, and just in time too, as the mutant nation was in the midst of being overrun with invading Brood at the time. Consuming the King Egg allowed Brood to tap into and basically control the hive mind, becoming the leader of his species. And if you missed out on that whole fun adventure, you can check it out in the newest X-Men series. That's where that all went down, and it was pretty exciting to read. Bru initially appeared in the 2004 Astonishing X-Men series in issue 40, and would later team up with and be taken in by the X-Men, joining the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning. He'd also get to have like a really fun day with Tony Stark, which is another fun Bru adventure. Number 9. Candy Southern. While Candy wasn't necessarily a member, she did help the X-Men and made her first appearance in X-Men issue 31 in the 60s. She was a longtime friend of Angel's and would later end up dating Warren. She also would team up with the X-Men to help find Warren when he went missing after learning of the fellow mutant team's existence, and Warren Worthington III's role as Hero Angel on the team. Candy would later break up with Warren and was killed by X-Factor enemy and former friend Cameron Hodge. Candace Southern wasn't a mutant and didn't have any powers, but she was skilled in business. I personally would love to see her somehow be resurrected and return to the comics in the new X-Corp series, working alongside the mutants as a human ally in business. That could be pretty cool. Number 8. Vulcan. Vulcan is the retcon youngest brother of Alex and Scott Summers, aka Havoc and Cyclops. He was introduced during X-Men Deadly Genesis and was revealed to be one of the mutants who was part of Charles Xavier's original and formerly unknown rescue mission to save his team from Krakoa. Vulcan was the name he'd chosen for himself, though his name was originally Gabriel Summers. When Catherine Summers was kidnapped, she was pregnant with Gabriel, but he was taken from her womb and put in an incubation accelerator. Once fully grown, he was intended to be used as the Shi'ar Emperor's servant, but he escaped and was found and recruited by Moira McTaggart to join the X-Men. Vulcan's powers are similar to both his brothers and involve energy manipulation. He is considered an Omega level mutant and is capable of absorbing energy and dispelling it in the form of blasts. He can also use the energy to heal, fly, create constructs, manipulate objects, and as a form of sustenance. Number 7. Mimic. Mimic is a mutant, but one who gained his abilities after knocking over a beaker accidentally in his father's lab, which caused a chemical reaction that created a strange red gas which he then inhaled. His powers allow him to mimic the abilities and skills of other beings within a certain distance of him. Increased exposure to others' abilities seems to also grant him more permanent adaptations of those powers. It wasn't until more recently that it was actually confirmed that Mimic was in fact a mutant during House of X, as suspected since the 90s. Instead, we were led to believe initially that he was a human whose DNA was genetically altered. While not often appearing in the comics, Mimic, aka Calvin Rankin, is a character who has been around since the 60s, if you can believe it, and first appeared in X-Men issue 19, where fans were introduced to him and the question was posed of whether or not Mimic was a mutant or something far worse. Turns out he was a mutant. Mimic is a longtime villain of the X-Men who did for a time play the role of Hero and has served on both the heroic X-Men team as well as Norman Osborn's dark X-Men team during the events of Dark Reign. But anyways, I feel like Norman Osborn's team should count, so if we do a part 5, expect me to get into some of that. Number 6. Warbird. Warbird is a pretty unique character, having been born as a member of the Shi'ar Empire, but not knowing her parents. Her mother was an alien who was taken captive and who was killed by giving birth to Avidara, who would grow up to be Warbird. Her mother's reproductive organs basically were not compatible with the Shi'ar, and so she did not survive the pregnancy. Avidara would grow up to become a Shi'ar warrior and join the prestigious Warbirds, whose job it was to guard the royal family. Warbird is not a mutant, but would work alongside the X-Men team and cross paths with them while being tasked with guarding over Kid Gladiator. She first appeared in Wolverine and the X-Men in issue number 1. Number 5. Spiral. Spiral has been an enemy of the X-Men, but would also become a member of Storm and Psylocke's X-Force team. She was a human known as Rita Hayward, who would end up in the Mojoverse and become part of a time paradox, having been attacked by her future mutated self, Spiral. Originally, she was a stunt woman who ended up falling in love with Longshot during his time on Earth and returned with him to the Mojoverse. When his plan to defeat Mojo failed, Rita was captured and was modified by Mojo to have 6 arms, one of which was completely cybernetic. Spiral herself is part cyborg, part human mutate as a result of the modifications performed on her. She was also the one responsible, acting as an agent of Mojo, for giving Psylocke her cybernetic eyes. True facts. Number 4. Shark Girl. Seriously, Wolverine and the X-Men has such a fun group of characters in it. If you haven't checked it out, you need to check it out. Ira dos Santos is one of that group. She first appeared in issue 20 of the series and has also been referred to as Were-Shark before, which is pretty fitting, as both names would imply she is basically part shark, part human, and that's also her mutation. Shark Girl is one of the mutants who appeared following the dispersion of the Phoenix Force. When her powers first manifested, both the Brotherhood and the X-Men attempted to recruit her to their causes. She refused both offers and was later kidnapped by Mystique, who attempted to then recruit her using force, basically. Fortunately, she was saved by Angel and would eventually agree to attend the Jean Grey School of Higher Learning. Shark Girl can transform into a full shark and can also transform into a part shark, part human, basically like a land shark. While in these forms, she can survive either underwater or on land and has enhanced strength, stamina, and speed. Number 3. Adam X. We are going back to the crazy Summers family tree for this one. Adam X is the half-brother of Cyclops, Havoc, and Vulcan. His mother is Catherine Summers, but his father was the emperor of the Shi'ar Empire, Emperor Deken Naramani. Adam X first came on the scene in the 90s, and to hear his story, you'd easily be able to peg him as a 90s character. Trust. He was abducted when he was just a baby from the genetic lab in which he was created by Joneth, who became his adoptive father and raised him. Growing up, his mutant powers would manifest, which allowed him to basically set others' blood on fire, burning them from the inside out, which already sounds like such a 90s power in my mind. He can also ignite his own blood, which is very painful, but grants him a speed boost. Adam would then learn that he was a hybrid being, part Shi'ar, part mutant. Number 2. Petra. Petra has the ability to manipulate rocks and rock formations. She can cause earthquakes and even use her powers to create diamonds. In fights, she can bind her opponents or completely destroy them by having the earth move to swallow them, and she can transform rocks into different kinds of weapons and wield them against her opponents, sending them hurtling towards them. Petra was recruited by Moira McTaggart after being apprehended by the police. Her family died in a rock slide when she was young, which to this day Petra actually wonders if she caused. Following that, she was moved into the foster care system, but after her adoptive father attempted to assault her, she used her powers to escape him and became a runaway. She discovered her ability to turn coal into diamonds, and she would later exchange these diamonds for a place to sleep, but eventually this kinda drew suspicion, and she was later tracked down and then taken in by the police. Fortunately, Moira arranged for her to be released, and then of course offered her a place as part of her team. Number 1. Sway. I love Sway. Her powers are just so cool and her origin is so tragic. I feel so bad for Sway, but I'm also like, these powers are awesome. I love the way that they're phrased. I love the way that they're used. It's neat. Sway's powers manifested when she was just a teenager. While visiting New York City in preparation for college, Suzanne's parents and herself ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they were gunned down during an attack that was basically part of a gang war. While Suzanne's parents were killed in the attack, she miraculously survived, due to the manifestation of her powers, which allowed her to manipulate the flow of time. She had instinctively stopped the bullets that would have hit her in midair, but she didn't have the experience or the understanding yet required to save her parents. Sway's powers allow her to control and manipulate time in her nearby vicinity. She can also rewind the temporal memory of a location, allowing her to basically review past events. It was using her powers that she was able to track down her parents' killers and report them to the police, helping them to apprehend those criminals. And revealing her abilities to the officers, she was basically put in contact with Moira McTaggart, and then of course ended up joining up with the X-Men. And that's also how Petra, Sway, and Vulcan all know each other. In case you read any of the new stuff and been like, who are these ladies, if you missed Deadly Genesis.